Welcome everyone to the unscripted side of the Accountability Breakfast, and I hope you enjoyed the Accountability Breakfast. So more people still coming in? Yeah, great. So good to see all of you here. Thank you so much for joining us. And just to reiterate that we are just going to move with the flow, have fun, be real, be raw on this side. And we are here to share our unedited take on what was discussed at the Accountability Breakfast a few minutes ago and how it's basically aligned to the realities on the ground. And for this session, it's not about me, it's not about the people I will call on stage, but it's about you, our audience, the people who've joined us and taken time to just be here. We really appreciate you. So let us know on chat what you think about or what you felt about the Accountability Breakfast. If there are any questions that you feel we should talk about, or if you have any burning issue that we should address here, let us know. And let us know whether you agree with some of the things or if you disagree with what we will be saying. So please make use of the reactions somewhere down there on the screen. Give us the thumbs up, give us the, the smiley faces and all that as we go along. So for now, I will invite on the virtual stage the commentators from various countries in Africa and some of those countries that made commitment to the PMNCH call to action on COVID-19 to just reflect on those commitments, how they have advanced, and what needs to happen to ensure greater accountability to the people. So on the virtual stage, allow me to welcome Amos Mwale, who is the Executive Director of Zambia's Center for Reproductive Health and Education. He's also a member of the Global Advisory Council for UNFPA and was one of the key members that developed Family Planning 2020.
Mary, where do you
Yeah, Amos Mwale Design. Olá a todos, bom dia.
You and the leaders out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we also have Bucky Williams, who is currently the Sexual and Reproductive Health Rights Program Lead at Akina Mama wa Africa, a feminist Pan-African leadership development organization founded by a group of visionary African women. She is a feminist and was named a Malala Education Champion in 2020. Bucky, karibu sana, we say that in Swahili, or welcome in English.
Sawa. Okay, thank you, Maxi. I'm really glad to be here.
Great, good to see you. And next we have Umar Tau. Tau Umar is the National Secretary General of the Burkinabe Association for Family Welfare and Youth Representative in the GFF Investor Group. Tau, welcome. We also have Nerima Were from Kenya. Nerima is the Deputy Executive Director at KELIN, that is the Kenya Legal and Ethical Issues Network on HIV and AIDS. She is also an academic working as a tutorial fellow at the University of Nairobi, where she's pursuing her PhD. And we have Betsy McCallum, who is the Chief Executive Officer of White Ribbon Alliance. Betsy is responsible for setting the strategic direction of the organization. She has lived and worked in Sub-Saharan Africa and Central America and worked in more than 20 countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So be sure that Betsy is the best person to answer any question you have that are global or cross-cutting and affects Africans and what we have discussed in the Accountability Breakfast. We also have Masiko Matempo from Malawi. She works as the health coordinator at the Future Life Now program and serves as the vice president for the Young Feminist Network, as well as vice chair for the PMNCH AYC. Masiko, welcome on stage. And lastly, we have Tian Johnson from South Africa. Tian Johnson is a queer African activist and founder and head of the African Alliance, a global nonprofit working on a range of health rights issues with a current focus on COVID-19. Tian, you're welcome. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome on the virtual stage. I will come to you shortly, but before we start, I just want us to, in one or two words, we are doing a Mentimeter. So in one or two words, what comes to your mind when you think about accountability? Put this on chat, ladies and gentlemen. When we talk about accountability, what comes to your mind? Let me know what comes to your mind. And I will start with the panel here before we go to people on chat. And I will start with you, Tian. When we talk about accountability, what comes to your mind? 2 words only.
Challenging power.
Wow. Nerima Were, 2 words. Accountability.
Social contract.
Bucky.
I would say people power.
People
People
power.
power.
Masiko, 2 words that comes to your mind when you talk about accountability.
Responsibility and transparency.
Those are 3 words. Okay, Betsy.
Wow.
2 words. Betsy.
Social justice.
Come again?
Social justice.
Social justice. Who have I not called on the stage? Tao. 2 words that come to your mind when you see the word accountability. As we wait for Tao, Amos Mwale, give me your 2 words.
Thanks. For me, it's efficiency and resources.
3 words. All right, Tao. Oh, and there's some words that are coming. We have transparency, social justice, citizen voice, trust, efficiency, all those. Sunshine, transparency, Jude, Adam, sunshine and transparency. Thank you. Transparency and respect. That's from Deborah Pascali Bonaro. Wow, beautiful name. And then spent resources. Winnie Chelagat. When she hears the words accountability, she's thinking about spent resources. Wow, thank you very much. And Amanda is just reminding us that the after show is offering simultaneous French and Portuguese translation. So you can have these options at the lower bar. Just click on interpretation to choose your language, whichever is appropriate for you, and let us get the ball rolling. So thank you very much. And now we'll go straight to the panel. We have all been at the accountability breakfast, and there's some questions that have come up. And the first one that I want us to discuss, very simple. Do you think that whatever we have done at the accountability breakfast and everything that we keep doing in these conferences as we speak, are we speaking for the community, the people at the grassroots, are the indigenous people living in informal settlements, women working in the informal economy, and the women in the rural informal settlements, are they adequately represented in our conversations? Masiko.
Well, Mercy, thanks for that question. And I think there is more that we could be doing, but I think obviously we've had great representation from different young people across the region, really speaking not just only from a personal perspective, but speaking as a representative representing different groups of people across the region. But I personally believe that we need to empower people to tell their own stories. So I think it would also be great to hear from the horse's mouth directly, as opposed to just people as who are just always representing and speaking on people's behalf. So I think that we do have representation. We do have perceptions that have different variations, but it's also important to empower people to tell their own stories.
Thank you. Betsy, you lead an organization that is really championing, or is saying it is championing for the rights and well-being and health of women, children, and adolescents. Are you representative enough? All these panels we are setting, are they representative enough? If you look inwards, what do you feel? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think, there's still a lot of intermediaries that are happening, kind of channeling some of the voices and perspectives. And also that while I think we've come a long way, it's also, events like today that are bringing in different perspectives and representation still are highly scripted. So again, that real opportunity, as one of the fellow panelists said, of challenging power is not happening.
Okay. Tian, do you feel represented as a queer African activist? Do you feel represented when you sit through all these conversations we are having, and you see all these speeches? We have had our governments talking about commitment and all that, especially on issues, around, the LGBTQ and all issues about the queer fraternity and all that. What do you feel? What is your honest opinion about all this?
I absolutely don't feel that the representation is there. But I also feel that the role of funders, the role of INGOs, the role of our government all have a complicit hand in whether or not that representation happens. And I think the urgency, apart from the commitments, I think an underlying urgency is for us to galvanize, agitate, and mobilize for the urgent decolonization of global public health. I think that is a key step to getting towards the representation that we seek for ourselves.
Okay, so how else can we then ensure adequate representation? How can we ensure community members contribute to the accountability around government actions, especially during this COVID-19 period, and not only for the queer community? And I will go around and ask this question to all the commentators. How can we ensure that we have community members and all those who are marginalized, feel represented? And I will also come to you, Betsy, so that you tell us what is going to change. It's really good that you're looking inwards and realizing that even as organizations like WRA and all these organizations, you've not gotten everything 100%, and you are ready and willing to work on that. So thank you very much. And I'm seeing comments on chat, really appreciating for that. So thank you, Betsy, and thank you, Tian. So Tian, let's again start with you. How do we ensure accountability to ensure you're represented? Very briefly.
I think we have to tackle the issue of power. We have to tackle the issue of power and voice within organizations. The reality here in this amazing unscripted space is that within organizations, there are fights. There are material fights and battles around who attends, around who speaks, around what they say, around how they say it. So just like Betsy said, highly scripted, highly polished remarks to appeal primarily to a global audience, to your donor partners, and then perhaps in the third or fourth instance, to the communities that you actually claim to be speaking for or on behalf of. So I do think it's a power and an ego issue.
Thank you, Tian. And Amos, community members' contribution to accountability around government's action. How do we go about that? Tian has talked about power. What tags that you had the most when you look at community members and their contribution to accountability around government's action? Where should we head?
Thank you. I think the beginning point is that we need to empower the community members so that they are able to speak openly, and also they're able to have the opportunity to participate. One of the things that has been more difficult is to ensure that there are opportunities that empowers everyone in the participation of the issues that actually affect the community. So you can't talk about opportunities if people are not empowered. We need to look at the skills that they need. We need to look at the empowerment itself, what information they have, and then they also need to know what it is that they are discussing. For instance, the commitments that have been made. How many of the community members are actually aware about these communities? About these commitments. If they are not aware about the commitments, then we are just doing a talk show. Without that, then it's difficult. So knowledge, skills, and empowerment is key for me.
Bucky, are we doing a talk show? How do you feel? Is your community empowered to, hold the government accountable?
You know what? I think we since we're being honest here, I think it's quite important to recognize that a lot of our community members do not trust the government for a very good reason. There is a lack of trust, and we can't pretend, or we can't move that away. So even if I go to young people in Nigeria, or I go talk to women about the commitments of the government, they will say, what's different now? What about when we really needed them and they didn't show up? Or when I go to my primary healthcare facility and the doors are locked, or they're stockouts and there's nothing happening. So the truth is, it's not even just having only the information, which I think is critical and important, but it's also the lack of trust that exists. And our government needs to do a lot of work to get that back. Another thing is that when we talk about communities, we talk about them as if they're over there. Like they're not that knowledgeable. They don't know what's going on. But I think until we start to see them as experts, as our clients, and as collaborators, because communities are doing for themselves. When the government doesn't show up, who's there? It's the community members. They're the ones who are showing up, finding alternatives, building, supporting health workers, supporting teachers. So I think it's quite critical to start looking at communities as just takers, but to see them as collaborators in this work and honor them in that way. And I think Winnie was the one who said, until we put communities at the center of the work that we're doing, we're just wasting our time at all. And we should not just see them as unknowledgeable or see them as only those who want to take from the government. But the truth is that they have been doing a lot of the work that the government hasn't done for a very long time, especially those who are the most left behind. So that's what I want to add.
Great, thank you, Bucky. And when we talk about the community, we're talking about even the youth. And Omar, I want you to address this. We've talking, and I asked this question at the accountability breakfast a few minutes ago again. We talk about the youth and them being at the table. And in these conferences, we have had chances being given to the youth to say what they feel. Do you feel it's sincere? Like, even after all this, when we go back to the grassroots, to our homes, are the efforts of the youths appreciated? And Nerima, you'll also answer this. Are the youth stepping up to ensure that the opportunities they are given, they are maximizing them to hold those in power and the government accountable? Omar. Or Nerima, either of you can go first. Nerima, you can go first.
Okay, thank you, Mercy. I hope you can hear me. So yes. I think I'll just go back to what I started by saying, social contract, in terms of appreciating that the relationship with the government isn't one of altruism or paternalism, but that we have an agreement. We exist in the state, we give you the power, and by giving you that power, you have to act in a certain way. And when we look at the efforts of the youth, I think youth efforts are not appreciated despite their continuous engagement in these issues. The poem was very clear. Don't just come for me for my vote, come for me for my vote if you want to actually impact meaningful change. And that's the reality. Not just young people, most people are only reached out to by their state on a 5-year cycle or a 4-year cycle. In the 5 years in between, as Bucky said, the government does nearly nothing for many people. And those people survive. And then after 5 years, you'll come when you need the vote and you'll make it seem like, well, I've been here for you, and you really haven't. And the reality is, unless you get to the point where we're quite cognizant of the fact that the government is there to serve us and not there to just wield power, this won't shift significantly. And many young people already know this and are agitating for this. And the next thing that I would say very quickly around knowledge and empowerment is to ensure when we actually seek for knowledge and empowerment, it's not just to go and tell people how they should do things, but to try and look at what they do as well and see what kind of knowledge they already have. Most of why young people are kicked out of spaces is because there's traditional forms of knowledge, but young people do things differently. Social media, digital mobilization, activism on Twitter, that's all young people. And if you keep thinking there's only one way to have an activist agenda by going out on the street, but yet people are mobilizing in the millions on Twitter and act like that's not happening, that's where we exclude them. So not accepting that they have a different form of knowledge and organizing and actually tapping into that form of knowledge and organizing to engage with young people. And that's where I think we fail quite significantly in not being cognizant of the fact that young people have a lot to offer, have a lot of knowledge and have different ways of mobilizing, and we don't tap into that.
Thank you very much, Nerima. And Tao Umar, I think he's connected now. Tao, are you there? Good to have you. Say something. Not yet? You are video off and audio off, so I can't hear you and I can't see any levels on your mic. Tao, Umar?
Oui.
Oh, great. Good to see you.
Je ne sais pas, voilà. Merci beaucoup pour la parole. Je suis très ravi de
Thank you very much for giving me the possibility of talking. Yes, there is the possibility of committing more, and the government has to take into consideration the fact that the young people want to engage more, to commit more. They work day and night to put into practice all the commitments. And more important is there is the force and commitment of all the activists, young people have a very powerful activist. When there is something to be discussed and they all discuss it and they talk about it. And they want to hear the government position about that subject. What happened is that the government has to express itself and say what they think about it. And the participations have to be guaranteed at all levels. Thank you for, I think the fact that all the NGOs and other organizations are working so that the young people are not forgotten and they can really express their opinion. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tao. Indeed, there is still room for improvement and room for us to engage the young people more. Now, I'm monitoring the charts and what you're saying. And Susan Stassi says, I get somewhat annoyed with high-level commitments and dialogue that has nothing to do with the rural poor. Wow. Betsy, how do you feel about that? I'm putting you on the spot because, first of all, I know White Ribbon Alliance has we have White Ribbon Alliance, Kenya White Ribbon Alliance, Malawi White Ribbon Alliance in all this other country. But you know, when you tell somebody about White Ribbon Alliance, the first thing that comes to their mind is that this organization that was born and bred somewhere in the West. And I don't know what you feel about those perceptions and things around that. And you can address that in relation to Susan Stassi's, question when she says, high-level commitments and dialogue that has nothing to do with the rural poor. What do you feel about that? And what is White Ribbon Alliance and all organizations, especially that have been on the forefront of fighting for the rights of women, children, and adolescents in Africa, have been doing?
Yeah. No, thanks, Mercy. I mean, I think I'll come on to White Ribbon in a moment, but I think what is also very clear from these global events is this false idea of mutual accountability is something that is said and promoted a lot. And for there to be mutual accountability, that means there actually has to be equal power dynamics. And there certainly are not. So I find that, I think, also a very big challenge within kind of the global health architecture, which has tried to depoliticize health when it is, of course, inherently political. So we will talk about political will, but we won't talk about politics and we won't talk about power. So many of the things that, came up today where we should be outraged in terms of, it was great to hear how strong the call was for vaccine equity, but how are we really getting behind and calling to task those that have the power to shift what that looks like? I saw very disturbingly in the video of commitments, the Gates Foundation listed as a country under commitments that had been made. And while they might have, the budget and influence of a nation, where's the accountability again to the people in terms of how resourcing decisions are made? So I think we need to shift that narrative and be much, much more honest in terms of what those power dynamics look like. So then similarly, as we hold up the mirror inside at White Ribbon was actually born and the model developed out of Nepal, but as it, again, sort of spread around the world and concentrated a secretariat in Washington, D.C. And we have to address that and look at that power dynamic and what that has meant in terms of particularly how decisions and resources, right, have been allocated and used, who has the opportunity and the platforms and so forth. So we are holding up that mirror. We are really breaking down some of the structures we put in place that are more of a kind of federation structure to really get back to that roots as a movement, to really have that inclusive, diverse representation, but also to be clear that we need to be addressing inequalities everywhere they exist, which certainly includes in countries like the United States, where we have massive disparities and a racist healthcare system. Thanks.
Thank you, Betsy. And you know, you talk about some of the videos that we have seen in the Accountability Breakfast. And, you know, one of the videos we've seen was basically talking about how young people and people are going into government offices and asking them, so these are the commitments you've made. Can we see some of the progress that you have made, or show us what you've been doing? And we've seen a minister there on a radio station talking about the rights of women, children, and adolescents. Guys, especially my people from Africa, please, how easy it is to walk into a minister's office, a member of parliament's office, and say, hey, I'm here, and you made commitments to the PMNCH COVID-19 call to action or any other commitment. I am here to see what you have done, and I just want an update on what your roadmap is. How easy it is. Nerima, we're going to an election next year. Come on, how easy it is to do that. What did you feel about the video? Is it representative of what is happening in Africa?
Well, I don't want to say Africa, but I'll say no. It's not representative of my experience in Kenya. We write letters to the Ministry of Health several times. We will write 10 letters with no response. We will go to court before they respond to us. And even when we are in court, they still don't participate in the court process. We have had 3 cases where we've gone to court because of a lack of response to our queries around information for women and girls, information around maternal health services, information around the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have had nearly no response from the government. The Attorney General's office has been completely quiet. So it's not easy. Even when you're using a formal process to engage the state, it's not easy. Walking into an office will not guarantee you access to a minister, to a secretary, to anyone of the sort. So it's not an easy process, and you only actually get that opportunity to interrogate the difficulties of this process probably once every 5 years.
Great. Bucky, how easy is it for you to do that? Are your ministers even in the office?
I will say that it's not easy.
Yeah, just a minute. Winnie on the chat has said,
Mercy.
Winnie on the chat has just said, are these people even in office? So Bucky, are your ministers and your health representatives in office to answer your questions on accountability, especially on issues around, you know, sexual and reproductive health rights and all that?
Health rights. Yeah, so I would say it's not easy. I mean, there's kind of a joke among those of us who attend regional and global conferences that it's easy to meet with your decision makers and policy makers in a UN corridor than it is to often meet them in their office. And it's always funny because they're like, see me when we get back home, see me when we get back home. And sometimes that changes. But then I also have to be honest as well, is that something that has worked in the past is that we might not have access to the minister, but we have managed to build strong relationships, and PMNCH has helped with that. I know Wife Ribbon Alliance has supported that to happen as well, is that we have built relationships with like the Director of Family Health. So for the Director of Family Health in Nigeria, Madam Salma, she's really very welcoming. She's connected in terms of adolescent health. We have Dr. Chris Goko, who's done a lot of work around age of consent. So the truth of the matter is that we've had to look for different advocacy strategies in which you build relationship with those who become our champions, who would speak for us in the meetings in the ministry, who would let us know when it is possible to meet the minister, and who would let us know what's going on and give us information about the processes that are happening. So I can't say that if you just wake up one day as a young person and go to the ministry, you will get information. No. But what it has meant is that we've had to build relationship with some key people within the ministry who then make it possible for us to find out information, who then make it possible for us to be able to do advocacy, and who then makes it possible for us to be able to hold them accountable and say, we saw that you've released the adolescent health policy. What's next? I hope it's not just that you've released it and we can't move forward. But that's just the reality of what we're dealing with, is that we've had to, as advocates, come up with creative strategies as they say, so that when they see your face in the meeting, they're like, ah, yes, you wrote me an email. I'm coming. So that they feel the need to actually be responsible to you. And we also take it seriously that we can do that as civil society organizations. So it's our responsibility also to take that information back to the women we work with, back to the young people that we work with, so that they know what's happening as well, because we say we're doing it in their name.
Yeah, that's true. Indeed, it's about us who have been given that space and that, you know, privilege to access these people, to take the information there. As much as we're advocating for everybody to be able to access our ministries and health threats and all that. Masiko, you have a really impressive profile, and you have been on these global stages so many times. Do your associations, and you know, when you walk into somebody's office and say, hey, I'm the vice chair for the PMNCH AYC, does that give you easy access? And how are you using that to help other young people, or to spread the word on the importance of advancing the rights of women, children, and adolescents?
Thank you so much for your question, Mercy. And I think I was just, when everyone was talking, I was like, oh, let me jump in. So very glad that I had to answer this. I just also wanted to address, I think with the video that we had watched earlier, I don't think it was necessarily saying that young people can easily walk into decision makers, you know, offices. I think for me as a creative as well, sometimes you have to find the shortest way to just relay information, and sometimes it comes in, you know, different creative forms. And I do also understand that government, you know, there is a bureaucratic process, and something that keeps coming out constantly from all these discussions is the need for accountability. And even with what Susan had said earlier, for example, with the global commitments, I don't necessarily think that the global commitments are not a reflection of, you know, women at the grassroots or people at the grassroots. They are, you know, you look at the COVID-19 call to action, taking action for women, children and adolescents, calling for a multi-sectoral response, ensuring nothing for us without us. That's us, you know, those are different representations. But what is the problem is that we see that these commitments are not really trickling down to the grassroots. We see that, you know, we keep talking about accountability, and accountability seems to be spontaneous. And that's also something I noticed from the Accountability Breakfast show. There is no one has really presented to us a systematic way of really holding our governments and ministers accountable. And as we empower grassroots to really hold governments accountable at a subnational level, we also need to ensure that these accountability indicators have a primary focus on the most poorest and the most marginalized. But to answer your question, no, it's not easy. And most times, I think somebody was mentioning that we get to meet our ministers at all these global events, but that's why we also need to call for a multi-sectoral approach. Bucky talked about PMNCH, for example, and White Women Alliance helping to leverage on the kind of build up that they have with high level partners. That's what we must be doing. That's what happens when we call for a multi-sectoral response approach. We leverage on different commitments, different perks that our partners have. And also as a person, as a young person who represents different young people in different platforms, like I mentioned, I always ensure that young people have a seat at the table. And as a young person, people always think, oh, Maz, represent these people, represent those people. But we're not, young people are not just, they're not a one size fits all group, you know. We also have our own diversities, and ensuring that young people in their own diversities are represented to the table is something that I am always doing, and ensuring that, like I mentioned, taking a backseat when I know it's time for me to take a backseat, and empowering people to tell their stories, to use their voices to tell us their stories. Yes, and that's on period.
Wow, great. Thank you so much. And allow me to, Alex Stevenson on chat, you asked a question when we started this conversation, and I'm seeing you're reiterating the same question. You asked why no one is talking about newborn health and newborn health funding in this meeting. And do you feel like we are completely ignoring newborns? I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'll let the panelists address that. You think African newborns are the most disadvantaged and marginalized people in the world. How can we advocate for their rights? When we talk about the rights of women, children, and adolescents, newborns fall under children, right, Betsy? Yeah, so guys, how are we advocating for the rights of newborns? And I'll leave that to you, Betsy, to answer Alex. From a global perspective, and I know he's narrowing it down to Africa, but you can start from a global perspective, then bring it down to Africa.
Sure. I mean, I think we're talking today a lot about some of these processes and systems where that is often inherently communities and advocates. But certainly the agenda of the accountability agenda we're talking about absolutely includes newborns. And I think from our perspective, putting really the voices and perspectives and action of women at the forefront includes very strongly that call for women to also be calling on what is needed for their newborns. And we work together with many that are a part of this call today to, develop a charter that calls for both the rights of women in maternity care and newborns, and is very explicit about what that means. And there's a lot of progress being made in that area. But I think, again, we in the context of today's conversation are really talking about where the power lies and how to use power and address privilege to see those changes for everyone, including the populations that are most marginalized.
Thank you very much, Betsy. Alex, if you feel that you are answered, please give me a thumbs up wherever you are, or send me a message, or send a message to everyone on chat. I hope you are at ease. I know you say the newborns have the very least power, but I hope Betsy has answered your question. And there's something that has come up, and allow me to address this. We were talking about having access to government ministers and people in power. And somebody has talked about we should focus on post-colonial Africa and how it is very easy for, somebody to come from, DC and Geneva, fly into an African country and have instant access to ministers that we have struggled for years to access. Can we talk about that, proximity to whiteness bit? And I will go, Tian, I'll come to you. What is your feeling about this?
Yeah, thanks, Mercy. I think, it's something we've seen time and time again. I remember when we were advocating for PrEP in this country, we had requested meeting after meeting. We had done sit-ins. I mean, we had done everything humanly possible. And next thing, you have an executive director of an NGO that flies straight in from DC. We have a meeting with him in the morning, and he says, oh no, he needs to rush because he's off to meet with the minister. And our jaws were just on the floor. But of course, they weren't on the floor for long because we understand how colonized our sector is. We understand that our local leaders regard our proximity to whiteness as competence. They regard our proximity to whiteness as potential for opportunity. They regard our proximity to whiteness as opportunities for international travel. These things are still incentives. And so it's really, really difficult to pin down that concept of accountability, because on one hand, you're trying to hold your local leaders to account, but on the other hand, you have perhaps well-intentioned NGOs who are coming into the country, exacerbating this harmful narrative and perpetuating it, pushing us further and further back.
Wow, thanks, Tian. Amos, Tian raises a very important point. We are living in countries that were, gained their independence years, some as far back as 60, 70 years ago. But do you think we are decolonized here in our minds?
Oh,
and how is this affecting our quest to seek for accountability?
It's a very, very difficult issue. I mean, like Tian has alluded to. However, I must mention that one of the things that I've learned over time is that if we need to get access to the decision makers, we need to have something to offer to them. We need to show that we have an extra skill that they need for them to listen to us. Of course, the proximity to the white, they always have something that they bring forward. Tian has alluded to, it could be travel, it could be resources, it could be some funding that the local institutions will not have. However, to ensure that this is done and it's done well, one of the things that CRE has done is that we have offered a special skill, which that now the ministry, like for instance in Zambia, depends on us on a number of things. Okay, so they know that if we don't seek some of the advice from colleagues from the civil society, then they will not let us pass on with this. So for instance, Tian was given an example of if someone comes from DC, they want to rush the minister, go with them, accompany them, because it's tricky. That's also an opportunity for you to go and meet your minister. And it should also be a demand, or should also be a request from the colleagues from the West that whenever they are stepping into our country, they are able to carry along the local civil society or the local partners to go to the minister and ensure that they are able to address the issues that they have. Because without that, in an event that you don't have access to your decision makers, without that, you're not able to do that. Now, I must come back to a very important issue that Bucky raised. We also need to realize that ministers don't make decisions. The ones who make decisions are technocrats. You have access to technocrats, you have access to the ministers. So is it that we want our issues to be raised by the minister through a technocrat, or we want our issues to be raised by ourselves? So one of the things that actually Bucky mentioned, and that's something that has worked for us, is work closely with the technocrats. They will always bring you in where decisions are being made. That's very, very important. All speeches, all policies are designed and developed by technocrats. A minister is a political person who just commits on something that has been developed by a technocrat or someone who has technical information on the subject matter. So you need to know who the right person is in that ministry so that you are able to ensure that you get to them and give them the information. Then it will get to the right place, it will get to the minister, and the issue will be raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Amos. And Bartolomeo Camlewis asks, talking of decolonization, why is it that most people educated from outside seem to be the people who drive change compared to some trained local? And I will ask Tao Omar to take this up and just give us his perspective, especially from a young person's perspective. Do you think this is the notion that young people believe that, somebody who is educated from outside, from abroad, from the US or whatever, is seen as the person to drive change compared to persons who are trained locally or within our countries? Omar?
Je pense que c'est un peu pareil partout en Afrique.
I think that the fact that we have the same realities all over Africa, there are, of course, there is the person who arrives and he is better educated from abroad, is well received here, whereas when we ask to be received, we are not received at all. And in fact, we are seen as somebody who wants to, we are a bore. In fact, we bother people. And when we want to talk to the ministers and give them our information, they do not want to listen to us. With the support of certain partners we had, we could meet some of the decision makers, but only with the help of these people who wanted to help us. But those who want to tell and talk to the minister have to really chase them around. It's so bad. And we have to give them all the information that we have. They want to give them a good image of themselves, so they sometimes they really receive the information, but we have to have an approach which is a little bit more aggressive than we have, and sometimes we really go after the government. And sometimes we go to the parliament to try and talk to them. That is sometimes the only place that we can really get in contact with them. And sometimes we force them, we ask and force them in the sense to engage themselves, to commit themselves. And we go and publish what we talk to them in the social media, and this helps us to go back to the representative and ask them about what they think about all these revolution that we have now, in the sense that the young people want to participate more, and so that these decision makers have to express themselves, and they'll tell their opinion. But anyway, it's really hard to get to them and to go to their offices and ask them to for a meeting, for instance. It's really, really very difficult. Thank you for listening to me.
Great, thank you very much, Tao. And I know we can talk about these things for hours to come. I can't believe we're almost done with an hour. We just have a few minutes remaining. And before we run out of time, allow me to ask a question that came up during the accountability breakfast a few minutes ago from the leadership dialogue. Natasha talked about high cost of data and digital tools and devices in Africa. And she talked about how we are looking at many other options of innovation. Right now, everybody is talking about embracing innovative ways and innovative technologies to address the issues around, what you're talking about today, the health and well-being of women, children, and adolescents. And she asked a very pertinent question. Have we maximized the platforms that we already have? I'll start with you, Tao. Have we maximized the platforms that you already have?
Déjà, je suis parfaitement en phase sur le fait qu'il faut mettre l'accent sur les plateformes numériques.
I think that we have to stress the digital platforms because young people really have more access to digital platforms, and we have really young people who have access to different platforms as well. And for instance, we have the platform with the access to internet, so where they can talk about themselves and they can ask for things that are interesting for themselves. We have other platforms that with only messages like SMS, and they do not have a lot of internet connection, but I think that the digital allows us to exchange information and touch many people and be able to be listened to. And that's what we have to do, is use these different platforms to try and change our reality here. And really, when there is a campaign and the government has to react and has to say what is their position. And most decision makers also use the internet connections. We have to see that when there are lots of people who want them to answer their questions, they have to take a stance. And I think that most people here think the same. We have to use these platforms to get to the decision makers. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Tao. And there's so many questions coming in. Somebody's asking how we can follow the money to make sure it is serving the people and reaching the most vulnerable. This is a whole new discussion that we need to be having. So White Ribbon Alliance, please note, we need another discussion on how to follow the money to ensure that women, children, and adolescents in Africa are getting the best from what they deserve. Now, we can go on and on, but I only have 4 minutes to wrap this up. So we are going to do another Mentimeter question. And we are asking, what is your major take-home learning from today's event? What is your major take-home learning from today's event? And as we fill that up, I'll just do a quick round with the panelists. A sentence, guys, please. What is your major take-home from this event? Nerima.
My major take-home and learning from this event is we need to have more women and girls in decision-making spaces. It's not enough to say that we want them there, we don't put them there. That's just tokenism. We have to move beyond tokenism as a continent if we want to see change.
Thank you. Amos?
Thanks. For me, the major take-home is that we are still far from achieving our objectives in ensuring that accountability actually is achieved. So let's ensure that we all.
Okay, Bucky? Bucky, can you hear me? All right, let's go to Masiko.
Thank you. There's so many things that I'm
Sorry, Bucky, your internet is pretty.
But I think
Sorry, Bucky, your internet is not good. We cannot hear you well. So
what I'm realizing is that there's a need. Yes. Oh.
Sorry, Bucky, your internet is not good. So let's go to Masiko as we fix that. What is your major take home and learning from today's event, Masiko?
All right, my major take homes, number one, is that we can't, progress cannot be resilient if we don't center young people, women, and adolescents. We also need to empower grassroots movements to hold governments accountable. And we also, political commitments and financial commitments are just as critical as accountability frameworks to hold governments accountable. And it is also critical for us to call on a multi-sectoral response, which is critical in addressing the different social determinants that women, children, and adolescents face. But last but not least is that young people need the institutional capacity and the institutional mechanisms to participate, design, and implement, and most importantly, hold governments accountable. And we need to decolonize our thinking and our systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Tian, very briefly, what is your learning from today's event?
Is that looking at all of the letterheads and government crests and the commitment letters video during the breakfast, it just highlights the hypocrisy for me. We are still waiting to see performance agreements signed by the deputy minister who was on the panel this morning. So much talk, so many declarations, so many 10-point plans. While we are assaulted, while we die, while we get killed for choosing to love who we want to love, they will be packing their bags to the next conference center to deliver opening remarks. So we need to rediscover our outrage as communities. Why are we still decades later begging, pleading, negotiating, bargaining for our dignity, our humanity? Is the fact that we have breath in our lungs not enough for them? It is violent. But as long as we have a critical amount of leaders who are on payroll that depends on our diplomacy, we will have to continue to watch what we say, be guarded in our engagements with those who have power, and never be able to speak our truth.
Thank you very much, Tian. And Bucky has written on chat, she says, her major take home is that we need to work across sectors. We need to work on accountability with those working on governance, corruption, tax justice, climate change, and women's rights. We cannot ignore macroeconomic policies and the impact of global frameworks. So we need to think beyond single issues. And finally, Betsy, what is your major take home learning from today's event?
I mean, my colleague said it so well, but I think pressure, we have to put pressure, bring pressure, continue to speak truth to power and continue to push for the changes that we want to see.
Thank you very much. Look at the results on the Mentimeter. There is much to do to ensure accountability is achieved. We need to look at and think about the hypocrisy of government. We need commitments. Commitments have been done. So now let's see the action. That is what we are running after. The struggle to get decision makers is a regional problem, and we have to push for change. We must pay attention to power dynamics and redistribute power. And then somebody else is saying, work closely with the technocrats. Let me see that. Yeah, work closely with technocrats, know who the right person is. That is Amos. The real need to bring authentic voices from communities, very important, people from the grassroots, the communities to the table to speak truth to power and on their issues of concern. Thank you very, very much, good people. Woo, it's been 1 hour. We are running late by a minute, so allow me to close this. Thank you very much, good people, for joining these conversations. We hope we can have such forums to discuss issues that are pertinent to us. This is just a start, so I'm hoping for the best. So thank you very much for joining us for the unscripted version of the Accountability Breakfast. And please keep the conversations going on Twitter, on social media, and in your homes. I keep reiterating, look inward. The change has to start here. We cannot hold other people accountable if we ourselves are not accountable to the people we're advocating for, to the women in our houses, the women in our countries, and to the women in Africa and globally. So thank you very much. It has been a pleasure being your moderator and host, and bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of your day or afternoon or evening. Bye.
Oh, bye-bye.
Thanks, Bessie, and bye, everyone.
Bye.